What's up, dog, everybody? It's Torrential Downfall. Today we are continuing our mini-series looking at TV, but this time we're not here to critique too much. I'd actually say we're here more to celebrate, because some shows just catch your attention when you don't expect them to. They entertain you and change the way in which you watch TV moving forward. And for this, there's only one place to really start. We're talking about The Sopranos. Let's start with an honest conversation about, how this show was created and what the focus is really on. James Gandolfini. Tony Soprano is one of the most complex characters written for a TV series or anything, whether it's the small screen or the big screen. He's a husband, he's a father, a patient in therapy, but he's also a mob boss. He's capable of both extraordinary violence as well as some real tenderness, sometimes in the same 5-minute scene, sometimes in the same sentence. And Gandolfini carries every single contradiction of the man without even letting you know once that it's a different person. What makes the performance so extraordinary is that, I guess in that same sense, it doesn't feel like a performance. There's not really a moment where you think it's an actor playing a gangster. You think this is Tony Soprano, full stop. It's not just in the way he speaks, but the way he moves, how he carries his body, and even the way in which he portrays emotions. You could even say just the way in which he shows silence shows that Gandolfini understood the character on a really almost like primal level. The supporting cast around him is also, equally extraordinary, with, Eddie Falco as Carmela, a woman who's playing exactly, knowing who her husband is, and, coming to terms with it as time goes on. But Gandolfini is really the son that the rest of the cast and the show orbits around. Without him, it's not that you'd say there is no show. I just think it just wouldn't be the same. I don't think that the Sopranos would be as acclaimed or as historic as it is, so to speak. I mean, one of the interesting things about the Sopranos isn't just the characters, it isn't just the storyline. It's also just how visually the show is given to us. If we start with the opening itself, it doesn't start with how a typical drama would do. There's no cinematic kind of grand opening in an obvious way, and that kind of just sets you up for how the show is going to be throughout the series. The restraint is what makes some of the visual language so powerful. Like, if we take an example of how it's visually kind of exercised, so to speak, we can take one of my favorite little scenes is how paranoia is shown in the TV series. When Tony's in a social situation, which he's seen throughout the series, with his friends, there's a specific scene where everyone is just laughing and they all seem to be very relaxed. But the way in which the camera is panned and highlighted for these laughs, really with the exaggerated close-ups, makes it seem that what was once an innocent scene, it is actually just everyone not just laughing, but laughing at him, and giving the clear kind of picture that the laughter's not just at Tony Soprano, but the way in which it's portrayed is almost like you are Tony in that scene, and the laughter is directed at you. And even though it's a short scene, it's such a, well, in my mind, a powerful, standout moment. I mean, I would call it masterclass. You can, I'm not a film buff. I don't have a videography degree, so I can't speak any further on it. But I really like how it, kind of gets you into the mind of this internal psychology through, this, external visual language. You don't need Tony to say he's paranoid in the moment. You can feel it, and the camera makes you feel it. So, we've spoken about where, this Sopranos begins, and to be honest, right, I don't want this to give anything or too much away of the actual storyline. I just want it to give you hopefully just snippets or reasons why you should want to watch it. It's such a masterpiece, and I want you to sort of go into it with no expectations. No expectation. I'm telling you that it's one of the greatest shows ever. So expectations, yes. But what I mean is, I don't want you going into there thinking that you've got an understanding of where the story may go, so to speak. But I just give little snippets of little things which I think are important to highlight. One of those, is how, in The Sopranos, you've got this mob boss, Tony Soprano, in therapy in what was 1999 on, an American network TV show. This alone is, a pretty standout. But, what David Chase and the writers of the Sopranos have done with this premise is just go beyond just, a mob boss in therapy. But it shows Tony with, serious mental health issues. He does have panic attacks, which aren't just typical comedy. He suffers through depression. He has a very complex relationship with his therapist, Dr. Melfi, and gives you a bit of a, look behind the looking glass, I guess you call it. I don't know what the phrase is, but it gives you a bit more of an insight into the therapeutic process that, we've not really seen before on screen, or, for a lot of people just in general, which includes the limits to therapy, resistance in it. Sometimes the breakthroughs that do happen, the breakthroughs that sometimes don't stick, the understanding of relapses. And critically, an important point, about sometimes reality, the role of being this mob boss, being a husband, being a father, is Tony's never let off the hook because he has these mental health struggles. It's held simultaneously that, he's fighting not only in his personal life, in, professionally when it comes to gang life, but also this general understanding of himself, and also that, yes, he has a lot of issues, but also what issues is he causing himself? What's the suffering he's causing? And what's really interesting is almost we use this, or we've seen it with this therapy to help explain who he is as a person, but critically, it doesn't excuse him, which is a really niche, high level distinction, which definitely takes time to get your head around. But, at a time when society viewed therapy, particularly for men, as weakness, and particularly for men in hyper-masculine environments like organised crime, You know, The Sopranos does something quite radical. You know, that these types of conversation matter, that what happens to you shapes who you become, that sitting in a room and talking about feelings isn't necessarily weakness. It sometimes can be the bravest thing that, you know, someone can do. I mean, even today, there's still stigmas when it comes to things like therapy, and maybe it's sharing some message that is still important for you know, some of us and any of us who are watching. The Sopranos also handles sexuality with a frankness and complexity that really was ahead of its time. You know, within this mob world that's aggressively, performatively masculine, where homophobia is rife, where weakness is punished, and the codes of the mob are really rigid and binding, the show does still find space to explore homosexuality, desire, and identity with real nuance. Characters navigate their sexuality within a world that would destroy them, you know, if it was ever found out. And the show doesn't ever try to sanitize that tension or try and resolve it neatly. It allows you and, you know, those in the show to sit in the discomfort. But, you know, there are also plenty of heterosex scenes in the show as well. Without giving too much away, Tony has sex scenes on the show, and it's great to see such body positivity where it's, you know, not the typical Hollywood trope of hot guy sleeps with hot girl. You know, I think a part of the message that the show is really trying to portray in this, you know, award winning show is, you know, fat guys can sleep with hot girls too. That's what a clear message is, it seems. Um, and you know, like on a side note, there is a lot of nudity in the show as well. So it's definitely not safe for work. You know, particularly when it's at Tony's workplace. Bada bing. I would say there's almost like too much nudity. But I've had to re-watch, you know, these various scenes just, you know, like for totally like research purposes, you know, for this video as an example. But anyways, the Sopranos ran for 6 seasons, and you know that encapsulated 86 episodes. Across the entire run, it maintains a standard of writing that, you know, very few shows have matched. The plotting is patient in a way that modern TV couldn't allow itself to be. Storylines develop across, you know, not just episodes but seasons. Character decisions made in, you know, the likes of season 1 and season 2 can have impacts towards the end. The world feels genuinely alive because it's paced more like real life than TV, essentially. Individual episodes function almost as short films. Some of the most celebrated are remarkable pieces of TV in their own right, just as standalone, let alone, you know, within a whole TV series. The way in which The Soprano is paced, or should I say the way in which The Sopranos is paced, is what's inspired a lot of modern greats, such as Breaking Bad, Mad Men, Naruto, and Ozark. And the themes that the shows are wrestling with, you know, the cost of violence, relationships within your family, you know, what you're born into before, you know, rather than what you can work towards. The American dream, they're handled with, you know, real depth and consistency that, you know, is very rewarding in a show that, you know, some others haven't been able to really emulate. And I'll be honest here, right? As I've said, this show's like a 9.5 out of 10. So many amazing parts. Everything, you know, is almost perfect. And when it comes to the end of The Sopranos, it's one of the most discussed finales in, you know, TV histories. You can just have a quick Google search and see how many pages will come up. You know, a lot of people love it. You know, one or two were furious about it. Personally, I think it was okay. I mean, it didn't blow me away, but what I will say is, you know, if we're talking about when I'm talking about the ending, I'm not talking about how everything's encapsulated, so to speak. Like, I do like how they try and tie things up. It's more just like that last 3 minutes of the last episode, you know? The ending's only that 3 minute scene. The Sopranos is 86 episodes of TV, and those 86 episodes are fully worth watching, regardless of what happens in that last 3 minutes. To be honest, and maybe this is more just for me, rather than you the viewer, but to let 3 minutes define your relationship, with the whole 86 episodes of The Sopranos would be like walking into the Sistine Chapel and saying you didn't like it just because, you weren't a fan of the gift shop. The gift shop. So yeah, I would still 100% advise watching it, even if, for example, that the ending or the last few minutes just weren't necessarily for me. And so, kind of just to wrap things up, The Sopranos isn't just a great TV show. It's kind of, a highlight of what TV can be when it's more than just entertainment. It has this idea that, it can be both a great watch and not have to compromise on things like complexity, patience, and expressing the difficulty of what it means to be a human being. It's changed what we've expected from TV, and again, has inspired the things or other things like The Wire, Bleach, Mad Men, as examples. So if you haven't watched The Sopranos, my advice is, watch it. If you have watched The Sopranos, watch it again, because even I'm finding lots of different things that I missed the first time around. But what's your favorite part of The Sopranos, and where do you sit on the ending? Is there something that you could say to me that could change my opinion? As always, do something nice for yourself today, as long as it hurts no one. Bye.